You've done everything right. You've stored beans and rice and water, but now you're staring at this cup of beans and you don't have an electric stove. The grid is down. You can't use your microwave. What are you going to do with these beans? Today we're going to show you 4 foolproof methods that will work when nothing else will. You want to see this. Hey, Provident Preppers, I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Kylene, and our goal is to help you become more self-reliant and be prepared for whatever life happens to throw your way. And that's why today we're talking about beans.
And not just beans, but how we're going to cook these if the grid goes down. So we're going to talk about 4 different kinds of beans, 4 different cooking methods, so that we can educate you. And we're going to show you which takes the longest, which takes the least, and how much fuel they use.
Jonathan's so excited about this because imagine the amount of leftover beans we're going to have. Believe me, he's going to eat every one of them.
And think about all the opportunities to measure stuff. Wow!
It's going to be a great day. Let's talk about bean basics to begin with. So we soak them overnight, and the reason why that's really important is because it helps them to cook more evenly, but most importantly, it helps them cook faster, which is going to be huge when it comes to saving fuel. And the more fuel you've saved, the less you have to store. So that's really important. The second thing is variety. There are so many different varieties of beans out there. I think lima beans should be outlawed. I think that's a terrible thing to do to a person, but every variety of bean is going to be just a little bit different in the amount of time it takes to cook, in its nutritional profile, its taste, its texture. So personally, I think it's a really good idea to store a variety of beans.
Absolutely. And why beans? Well, beans are high in protein. They have lots of fiber. They have an extended shelf life. They're very affordable. And as I've said before, beans, the magical fruit, the more you eat, the longer you live. They're just super healthy and super important for our storage.
He loves them so much. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges when it comes to grid down cooking. The first really is that you don't get to cook the way you've always cooked, and sometimes just that hurdle is a lot. And maybe you even haven't started cooking beans. It's so easy. It is so easy. So by the end of the show, you're going to be a pro. Fuel conservation is huge. So we're going to tackle a couple of techniques that will help us conserve fuel. Time management. We'll notice throughout this that depending on which method you use, it takes a lot of time to cook the beans. And then safety. We always want to make sure that we are safe. There are cooking methods that we are going to be using today that are inappropriate to use indoors. And we're going to use some flame indoors. So you've got to make sure that you are well prepared and that you think things through, and always make safety your first priority. So Johnny, I think it's time to get busy cooking these beans. Which one are we going to start with?
Well, I think we're going to get started with the Anasazi beans because they're going to be in the solar oven. Now, we've got a few challenges with when we're using the solar oven because sometimes the weather cooperates and sometimes it doesn't. And that's why we like a variety of methods so that we can choose what's going to work best that day. Now, the weather said we were going to be at a UV level of 8 today, which is excellent for cooking. But when I look outside, there's more clouds and haziness than somebody expected, more than I had expected based on the weather. So we'll see how this goes. This is going to be a new challenge for us to try and cook dry beans in maybe not ideal solar cooking conditions.
With 3 of these, the most important thing that we're going to do before we add anything else is we are going to soften up the beans. And then after the beans are soft, we're going to add the other ingredients. So let's get out there and get those in the solar oven.
We drained off the soak water, then we put these beans in this black pot. And the black pot is important because that black pot will absorb the heat. We've got about 1 inch of water on top here, and we're ready to put it in the sun oven. You can see that we're almost up to 300 degrees right now, so a little surprising. I didn't think we'd be quite that high yet, but we'll set this in here on the leveler tray and go ahead and close this up. And then we're just going to aim it using these aiming devices on the All-American Sun Oven. Okay, so we've got this aimed at the sun now, and we will have to do some adjustment. That is maybe a downside, but the upside is that it's really hard to burn stuff in here. We've left things in here way too long, and it just doesn't seem to burn it. So it takes a little longer to cook. Typically, it's going to take about 2 to 3 times longer, but when you're using free energy, hey, that works. Also, I like to wear my sunglasses when I'm doing this because these mirrored surfaces, when you catch the sun just right, they can really put a shine on your eyes and blind you. So off we go.
Method number 2 is going to be indoor cooking on what we call the Vesta. And we'll leave a link to this. This is super cool because it also doubles as a heater. The thing that I like about this is that the Vesta is safe to use indoors. So when we go to use the safe heat, we just want to pull up this wick. It'll help it light better.
I was going to say, you do need to be careful because sometimes you can't see that burning, but it is burning. And it is
really,
hot.
really hot. But the really cool thing is that while it's burning, it is one of the safest things to do. So I'll leave a link to get this on Amazon, but you can buy the fuel on Amazon, but the cheapest place is to go to Sam's Club and buy it. A whole case of 12 cans. You want the 6-hour cans. They sell 2-hour cans too, but I would get the 6-hour cans. They only cost $20 or right around there. So it's financially very feasible. The safe heat is super easy to store and safe to store. So that's one of the reasons we like it so much. We chose to use a pressure cooker on here because it's going to cook the beans so much faster. And when it comes to cooking beans, sometimes old beans will have a really hard time softening up. Like you could even put them in a crock pot and 3 days later, they won't be soft. Like sometimes it's really bad. In a pressure cooker, it has never failed. And so just by putting these in the pressure cooker, it significantly reduces the time and makes sure that we have a positive outcome.
This is probably going to take maybe one of the longest ones along with the sun oven because we are dealing with these little heat sources and they put out a lot of heat, but compared to your stove or compared to a propane burner, they aren't going to be as hot. So this might just take a while.
And okay, that's the other thing with the Vesta, you can use 1 can, 2 cans, or 3 cans. So by using 3 cans at once, we've tripled our BTUs that we're putting out. Sometimes the size of the pot, you might really only have wanted to use 2, but we opted to use 3 today.
Okay, our third method, we're going to use this thermal cooker, and we're cooking the black beans in here. Now, a thermal cooker allows us to get this up to heat on something like a propane stove or some other outdoor device. Then we put this lid on and we'll put it in this insulated box, just like that. We'll close it up, and that insulation helps to keep that cooking for a long time, kind of like a slow cooker, but without a continuous heat source.
So a couple of things that you should know about this. There are a bunch of different brands out here. I would not get a knockoff brand. I would invest the money and get something like the Thermal Shuttle Chef, I think it's called now. This was before the Shuttle Chef. This is old, it's been around for a really long time. But the thing that's super cool about it is that you just put it on the heat source. It has to bring it to a good rolling boil. Everything has to be hot. If you were to like cook a roast in here, the inside of the roast would be cool and it would cool everything else down. So if you would need to like cut it into pieces so that you could bring it to a good rolling boil and then it continues to cook. But with beans, we don't have that problem. So we're gonna just take it out on the propane stove and cook this until it comes to a good rolling boil. Then we're gonna tuck it in here. But quite frankly, this doesn't do as good of a job as like when we take the ice chest and we'll line it with blankets. That's a great free way to be able to do it. This is just highly convenient. So when we bring it back in here, I'll wrap it in a towel or a baby blanket or something just to give it a little bit more insulation. But this is one of those things you just tuck away in your brain, right? Because all you need, you can use any pot, but you need at least 4 inches of insulation all the way around, underneath, on the sides, and on top. And then it will take 4 times as long to cook, but it will require no additional fuel. One of the caveats to this though is you need to make sure that it's always above safe cooking temperature. So if you're new to this, you wanna make sure that when you open it up and taste it, it needs to like be hot so you can barely taste it without burning your tongue. That's how hot it needs to be. So it takes a little while to get the hang of it, but beans are a fantastic thing to start your journey on. So let's go bring these to a boil.
Now, we absolutely love propane. It's a super fuel. It's easy to store. It's got a lot of energy. It's very easy to use. We like using it on this Camp Chef. We use it with a grill box, or now without the grill box, just to cook. It's just an amazing fuel that stores forever. course, that's based on the container that it's in, but if you've got good containers in good condition, this will store for a very long time. Make sure that you do check with your local codes to make sure that you are storing an appropriate amount and doing it legally. The only downside to the propane is that if you're using it in an indoor setting, it is heavier than air and it will sink down and just find a little pocket till some explosion or some ignition source hits it, and then you've got a problem. So you can only use propane indoors in an appliance that's rated for that. Okay, these beans are boiling. It only took a very short period of time and they are very hot. So we're going to just drop this right in here. Then we'll go wrap this. Under normal circumstances, people might just leave it like that, but we like to wrap it. So we're just going to spread out a towel here and see if we can get another layer of insulation all the way around this thing. And there it'll sit till it finishes cooking.
Now that we've done all of the super easy ways that I like, John is all about more power.
Absolutely. So today we're going to use an Instant Pot. Instant Pots are actually very, very efficient, and while they do draw electricity, we're going to see how much it is. I don't think it's actually going to be that much. So we're using a power station. This is the new grid down bug out.
Which he's been wanting for so long.
Yes, and we'll be doing a review on that and give you all the details later, but today we're going to use it and we're just going to actually measure stuff.
Of course.
So,
of course we're going to measure stuff.
So we're going to plug this actually into here. We're going to turn this on, and Mama's going to work her magic with the Instant Pot, and we're going to see how efficient this actually is, and I think it'll actually do pretty well, and it will work fairly fast.
All right, 15 minutes. And that's the cool thing about an Instant Pot. So if you're not in a grid down situation, I would highly encourage you to buy an Instant Pot and learn how to use it, because you will save so much money just by buying dry beans and being able to cook them. And I can go from unsoaked beans to dinner in less than an hour in an Instant Pot. So it is fabulous. Okay, these are done. And we're just gonna take the little lid off. So they're soft. And so this is Jonathan's recipe. This is one that he totally came up with himself. So he dumps a can of corn in here. And then we have our chipotle peppers, but he only cuts up one. They're a little bit on the spicy side, but they give it amazing flavor.
Yep. So this will make several batches. This little can will make several batches of beans.
And it makes all the difference. And then we want 1.5 teaspoons of salt. You may need a little bit more salt than that. And then 2 tablespoons of dried onions. And that's it. Then we're just gonna stir this around, mix it up, and then we're gonna put it back in and then pressure cook it for 1 minute, and it should be done. Then I think we'll just unplug it and we'll just set it back here and let it just naturally pressure release. I mean, that's another thing about pressure cooking. If you haven't done that before, it builds up pressure. And if you release it right away, it doesn't cook as long. Some things you want to, but with the beans, it really is best for you to just let the pressure release naturally, which means you don't have it plugged in and you don't have to waste any electricity doing that. Okay, this was on the Vesta, and these are the pinto beans. They look really great and soft. We are making them into refried beans without refrying them, because that's usually what we do. Normally, we'll do an immersion blender, but because we're doing power out, we're doing the John blender.
There we go.
1.5 teaspoons of salt. You might want more than that, just totally your personal preference, and then 2 tablespoons of onion. And then we're just gonna mash this up. If you wanted to, you could put it back on the burner and kind of let it simmer a bit, but you really don't have to. Those onions will very quickly absorb the moisture. If you find you have too much water, we could have drained that off at the beginning, but you can also just put it back on the stove and it will very, very quickly lose the water. And then with the refried beans too, sometimes it looks really liquidy and then it sits for just a bit and starts to cool off and it gets thicker.
They thicken up, yeah.
So, and they're just so good. These took surprisingly little time to cook, but they actually were pressure cooking for 30 minutes on here because I got distracted and John had to come get me and say, hey, aren't these done? They really only needed to do 15. So,
and let me just mention a really interesting thing here. To get it started, we had 3 cans going. Once it started to rock, I extinguished 1 can, and then it was still rocking 5 minutes later, so I extinguished another can, and then it was just fine. You could hear an occasional little burst of steam, but it stayed at pressure with just 1 can. So talk about fuel conservation. It worked really well.
That's awesome.
Well, it's almost 4 o'clock and we're about to lose our UV. It's been a rough day for the sun oven. We're gonna check and see if by chance we got soft beans. Still crunchy. So we've got to go to plan B. We're going to have to take this, put it in another pot, and use another alternative method to get it up to the point where those beans are soft, and then we can season them. So this is good old dependable plan B. We're just going to dump these in. And we'll use propane to get the job done.
All right, well, after that last one, I'm a little bit afraid to open this because with this thermal cooking, there's no peaking, like no peaking. So if this fails, it's got to go back on the burner too.
Okay.
There we go. Okay, feels very, very warm. Oh, you want to test those, Daddy? See if they're done? And, okay, what's my temperature? 163. Yeah. So what's the scoop? Are they, let's see. Gotta go back.
Yeah.
Gotta go back. They're not done. All right. Let's go take this. We will eat eventually. Eventually, John will get his beans.
Might be midnight, but.
Okay, with any cooking challenge, you've got your problems, right? And the sun just wasn't good enough today. So this is off the propane cooker now, and it's taking just a long time to get this done today. But this is what we're gonna do for our recipe. So we're gonna add 1 can of diced tomatoes with chilies. The Anasazi beans are good. They're a lot like pinto beans. And then a 1/4 cup dried onion. And these are some of our freeze-dried peppers, 1/4 cup of those. And then 2 tablespoons of chili powder. It's looking beautiful now.
Oh, and it's smelling good too.
1 teaspoon cumin. And 1 teaspoon of dried oregano. 1/2 teaspoon paprika. That's so pretty. 1.5 teaspoons salt. And then 1/2 teaspoon of black pepper. Now in this, you could also add any vegetables you wanted, like you could do a can of corn, or you could do freeze-dried zucchini seems to be something I'm looking at thinking, But now that we've put all this in it, it needs to go back on the propane stove and simmer for about 20 minutes.
So this really highlights kind of the unpredictability of solar. I love the solar oven, and a lot of times it does just an amazing job. But this time we couldn't have outguessed the clouds, and got up to 250 a couple of times and then up and down, and just couldn't get some consistent momentum.
And that's one of the things that we found when we did our 30-day grid down cooking challenge. Everything took longer. You should click the card in the corner and go and watch that playlist. It was a rough month for me because I couldn't use any of our normal stuff, and everything was late. Everything took longer. Everything was more work.
But we learned a lot.
We learned a lot.
We learned a lot from it, and
yet here
we're
we
better
are, doing it again.
Yeah. It's just part of the nature of it.
Okay, the beans are softened up. We're just gonna add a can of tomatoes with chili, salt. It's 1.5 teaspoons, and then 2 tablespoons of dehydrated onion. Mix it up, and then we just want the flavors to just kind of meld for just a few minutes. So we'll go stick it back on the stove, and then after this long day of grid down cooking, we're going to talk about what we learned.
Let's wrap this up now. It's been a little longer day than we had anticipated, but that's okay. We got there. Let's talk about the winners and the losers here. I guess they're all winners in a way, but
That one smells good.
This one with the Instant Pot plugged into the power station, it worked the fastest, and it didn't use that much energy. We're talking about 0.31 kilowatt hours, 310 watts of power. Really not bad at all. That's about 1/12 of that power station, so easily recharged. The second one was the Vesta, which worked really well.
Me a little bit.
Yeah, it worked really well. And
I love the Vesta, but I was really surprised that it was. But I think it's the combination of the pressure cookers. Both of these, the winners, were pressure cookers.
Yep.
Right? I don't know if you remember how runny those were before, but then they get a little bit of time to set up, and
they're nice and thick.
Beautiful refried beans.
Now I should say here, the winner is really me, because I have lots of really yummy bean recipes that I get to eat. I'll put a lot of them in the freezer and just eat them over the next 3 or 4 weeks, but delicious.
Okay, so let's talk about this one. This one was kind of sad.
Yeah, it struggled just a little bit. We did get it up to a boil. We put it in the container.
The shuttle chef. So
yep.
Normally this would have done significantly better. I think the problem was we just brought it up to temperature and we didn't let it cook. We probably should have let it cook for like 10 minutes on there to give it a good head start. But very honestly, most of the time, if we're cooking beans, we're doing it in a pressure cooker and then putting it like in a hay box. The things that I do in here are things like stews or soups, and it hasn't been a lot of beans. So I learned on that one. Next time I will leave it on the propane longer and let it get a little bit of a better jump on that. Or we would have had to leave this in longer, but it's been a long time.
Yeah.
5.5 hours.
Yeah, it took quite a while, and then they still weren't done, so we had to bring them up again. So we got the beans soft, got them seasoned, and they're delicious, but it took a bit longer than we had hoped.
Because they had, even after they became soft, right? And then we added all the ingredients, and then they had to simmer again.
And this took about 1/4 gallon of propane. So not a huge amount, but it was still something. And then we struggled a lot with the sun oven today.
It didn't work very well.
And that's part of the lesson here is some days the sun oven just does amazing for, no fuel cost and a very safe cooking device. But other times, like today, we just had clouds roll in, and then we'd get a few minutes of sunshine and then more clouds roll in, and it just didn't do super well. The cost of the fuel was zero.
Except
then we had to put it on the propane. So yeah, we used a little bit for that, but yeah. So there you have it. 4 cooking methods, 4 good recipes that you have that you can use.
This one's not as good, I don't think. This one, the refried beans, are fabulous. These white beans, they're good. The pinto bean or the black beans, I like those.
Yeah, super good.
I don't know that I like the other recipe. I mean, you choose.
But I do, and
there
so
you go.
I will eat them.
There you go. But seriously, I think pressure cooking is the answer, because even if the pressure cooker, we did it on the Vesta, but we could have also done it, okay, we did on the Vesta with safe heat for indoor cooking. But if I would have just put this out on the propane burner and just, given it a few minutes to come up to pressure and then put it in a hay box, this is amazing. And I do think that works really well.
So if you haven't discovered pressure cooking, we encourage you to do it because it makes such a huge difference.
Huge difference.
As Mama said earlier about the beans softening up, even old beans will soften up in a pressure cooker. It saves so much energy. We encourage you to look into getting some kind of a pressure cooker, whether it's the Instant Pot or a regular old-fashioned pressure cooker. It just makes a world of difference.
And the other thing is you need to practice. You got to learn how to do this, because 5.5 hours, if you've budgeted a couple hours to cook and dinner is 5.5 hours later, you're going to have some pretty hangry people. So practice is incredibly important. Thank you for joining us on our crazy bean cooking day.
Yeah.
And now it's your turn. Tell us all about how you plan to cook beans in a grid down situation. Or maybe you're not going to cook beans at all.
Oh no, don't go there. Don't go there. Beans are good. Hey, drop your comments down and let's talk about them. Let's learn from each other. And thanks for being part of the solution.